Cabinet has agreed in principle to establish a travel bubble with Australia, we anticipate in the first quarter of 2021.
Hello and welcome to the final Business New Zealand policy update of the year. I'm Grant Walker, joined by Business New Zealand CEO Kirk Hope. Well, Kirk, before we look back at the year that some of us probably want to forget and get your reflections on it, the PM has now confirmed that there will be a travel bubble with Australia likely to come into effect in the first quarter of next year. I suppose it's welcome news, but still it's a fair way out.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important though for businesses to start to plan around that. When that bubble comes into operation, it'll free up about 40% of the quarantine facilities. So anyone coming into New Zealand from Australia, will no longer have to quarantine, I presume. And so that's 40% more space for particularly critical workers coming into New Zealand from other parts of the world to be able to quarantine. So at the moment, that's one of the real challenges that businesses are facing. Remarkably, we have skill shortages in New Zealand across a range of sectors, and so we still are reliant for across the skill spectrum for people coming into New Zealand. So it'll be critical for freeing that up.
Also, but how do you decide who's going to be first? Because there are so many industries, through to chefs, through to fruit pickers, through to IT professionals. We're running short.
Yeah, so there's a categorisation process for that. But what has been really challenging is when you get New Zealanders coming across the border from Australia, who of course will get a priority for MIQ and for they don't face any immigration challenges. So once you free that up, that is the biggest part of the quarantine space.
Where's tourism and all that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think if there may well be a reasonably strong demand from Australians to get out of parts of Australia. I mean, who wouldn't want to? Oh, but that's unfair on their Australian cousins, of course. But of course, you'd hope for the New Zealand tourism sector, because the Australians coming into New Zealand are about 40% of the international tourism market. So getting those people travelling again safely will be really important.
All right, let's have a look at the year that was. What would you consider to be the biggest wins business-wise?
Look, I think two things: adaptability and resilience would be my observation. You've seen how the economy has rebounded really strongly. Businesses were able to adapt, move online, use technology to be able to connect with their customers, their stakeholders, their staff, in a way that kept them able to operate. So that they adapted quite quickly, and for a long period of time, I think a lot of people had probably been struggling with whether to make the leap into using some of these technology tools. To be fair, I think if you thought about the timing of COVID, it's happened when some access to some technologies has never been cheaper, and that's made it really easy for people. The tools are really easy to use, which has been great for staff, keeping in contact with staff and customers, still being able to do business. And also it happening at the same time in other parts of the world has meant that New Zealand businesses haven't necessarily lost out, because people in those jurisdictions have gotten used to doing business by way of Zoom, Teams, whatever the technologies that are being deployed, but also your ability to be advertised in an online space as well.
Do you think it's going to make a difference to, a lot of people are still working from home. Are businesses, do you think, now ever going to go back to how they were, or is it now time to accept that there's different ways of doing things, which include working from home, which include other things that we did do during COVID?
Yeah, I think, again, it really concentrated and magnified a trend that was already happening, that being flexible working. There was already a demand for it for certain industries. It's not possible for certain industries. If you're in some parts of manufacturing, it's very challenging. You've got to be in the plant. But where, some, 50% of the economy, maybe even more, is services based. So where it's possible, I think, again, it just accelerated some of those changes. I think businesses have to be careful about what may be a false economy of working from home for their workers, and that is, businesses will still have health and safety obligations, still have to make sure that the setup that people are using in their home is right for all those reasons, so that they can meet their obligations as an employer. So I think there'll be some reflections around that, making sure they just have the right gear, and the employer might be up for some of that. So I think whilst we were able to do it quickly for COVID, there will need to be a bit of reflection about how to do it if you want to do it more long term.
I want to talk about Business New Zealand now. I want you to go back to the beginning of the year when you're looking at the year ahead, not knowing what was coming. What's the biggest lesson you've learned with your team as well?
Communication and learn how to use the tools. I think I described Zoom as Zoomy in the early days. Had no idea really, and it was. I think again, the adaptability of businesses is down to the resilience and adaptability of the people within those businesses, and so I mean that would be my observation about the team. Also, the crisis, if you like, really helped people work much more closely together, get to know one another. I mean, I think one of the funniest things that we did was have a mimosa hour at 4:00 on a Friday by way of Zoom. People didn't need to have a drink if they didn't want to. Of course, they could just we could just sit around and talk about what we're experiencing, or just tell jokes, frankly, and kind of cheer each other up, which was I think a really cool way to finish off what could often be tough weeks for people.
Also learning too that businesses want information. They want to know what's going on more than ever.
Yeah, I mean, I think one observation that I make is that the Business New Zealand network, that's Business New Zealand, the EMA, the Canterbury Employers Chamber of Commerce, Business Central, and the Otago Southland Employers Association, we provided a huge volume of accurate, timely information to businesses to help them make decisions. We had people in the all of government centre so that we could get information out as quickly as possible to businesses, so that they knew what was going on. And what was often, really, really challenging circumstances for a lot of businesses. If you think back, I think we were told about alert levels on a Saturday, and we were told we were in alert level 2. And then by the following Tuesday, I think we're in alert level 4 and in lockdown. So that's a really short space of time for people to get their head around that, and then also figure out what does this mean for me. So I think the network worked really well. We stood up a helpline for businesses that weren't members of the network, so that they could get access to the same quality of information, so that businesses in general were well served, and they understood what they needed to do to, for example, comply with things like the wage subsidy. Where did they need to go? What was the best source of, say, online information, other than us, of course.
All right, I want you to put your thinking cap on now. We know that the travel bubble's coming. We know that we've still got a lot of issues. There's still businesses that are unsure whether they will or won't survive. What's the big issue for 2021? Do you think?
Well, I think there's probably more than one. One
survival, I suppose, is one.
Well, one is certainly what happens with New Zealand's border, and that's dependent on the vaccine, for example. It's dependent on how other countries are able to manage the risks and reduce the virus, and again that may be through vaccines. So I think the border will remain really important to New Zealand. It's people coming across our border contribute such a significant amount to the economy, and some economies will continue to be hard hit. Places like Auckland, even a big economy, but it's the gateway to the rest of New Zealand, and so those that will remain a really important feature of next year. The second thing I'd say is probably the carbon budgets that the Climate Commission are going to be producing by May next year. That will tell us as a business community and as a country exactly how hard the ask is. And I would expect that there'd be some really significant challenges in there. Then the government has got till the end of the year to respond from a policy perspective, and that will tell you how quickly New Zealand businesses may have to adapt yet again. So I think those two things will be very critical. There'll be other changes that are going on during the course of the year in industrial relations. Trade will remain critical for New Zealand. Where the trade war between the US and China plays out, where we end up with the EU and UK FTA negotiations, so that we can get again, access to a broader set of markets on better terms, really critical for our exporters.
Well, certainly lots to talk about. So
Always.
Always. Thank you very much. Thank you for watching. We will catch you in the new year.